Residential sales comparison and income approaches. Chapter 15, income capitalization approach. Single unit properties. Page 32, check your understanding. This quiz will have a total of 3 questions. There will be 1 question per page. You must achieve 66% to pass this quiz. Start quiz. Number 1. A motel has a gross annual income of $458,000 and its total operating expenses are $201,500. What is its expense ratio? A, 28%, B, 32%, C, 44%, or D, 54%. I'm going to go C, 44%. And what I did was I took the smaller number, which was the total operating expenses of $201,500. I put that in my calculator, and then I put the bigger number after, which was the gross annual income, $458,000, and I divided it, and it kicked me out 0.44. Number 2, in every statistical distribution, there is always a blank, but there may not be a blank. A mean and a median. B, a median and a mode. C, a mode and a mean. Or D, a mean and a range. I'm going to go B, a median and a mode. I'm not 100% on that, but I feel like there's always going to be a middle for median, and I feel like there might not always be a mode, which I believe was most often. Number 3, a measure of central tendency identified as the middle value in an ordered array of numerical values is the definition of A, a mean, B, a median, C, a mode, or D, a range. I'm going to go B, median. Assessment completed. Finish. You passed. You got 100%. So remember, a motel has a gross annual income of $458,000 and its total operating expenses are $201,500. What is its expense ratio? Take the smaller number, divide it by the bigger number, and it'll give you a decimal, 0.44, which is what it was. Number 2, in every statistical distribution, there is always a blank, but there may not be a blank. You said there's always a median, and there may not be a mode, and that was correct. And lastly, number 3, a measure of central tendency identified as the middle value in an ordered array of numerical values is the definition of, you said median, and that was correct. Continue.
Residential sales comparison and income approaches. Help. Documents. Email instructor. CH15 income capitalization approach. Single unit properties. PG 33 Market Rent. Notes. Leave a comment. Market rent. Once we have determined our GRM, we're halfway home. The next step is to estimate the gross monthly market rent of the subject property on an unfurnished basis. If the subject is already rented, we certainly need to analyze the current contract rent and see if it appears to be reasonable. We would need to examine the provisions of the lease, as we discussed earlier, and investigate if there were any atypical motivations when the lease was consummated. Then we need to go to the market and see what the market rent would be for that particular property, as opposed to the existing contract rent. When all is said and done, they may be the same. Many times properties are rented at market level. But we cannot assume that any contract rent is automatically equal to market rent. Contract rent is the amount for which the property is currently rented. Market rent is the amount for which the property should be rented. Simply taking the property's contract rent and assuming it is market rent can result in overvaluation or undervaluation, depending on whether the contract rent is lower or higher than market rent. End of page. Chapter start. 87%. Help. Documents. Email instructor. CH15 Income Capitalization Approach, Single Unit Properties. PG34 Market Rent. Notes. Leave a comment. Market rent. To estimate market rent, we need to research rental transactions of similar properties in the market area. Rents are the result of a negotiating process between a landlord and a prospective tenant. It is much akin to the bidding process that occurs between a seller and a prospective purchaser. Our sources for rental information may come from the subject property, comparable sales used in the sales comparison approach, other comparable sales, interviews with investors, interviews with landlords, interviews with tenants, interviews with neighbors, interviews with leasing agents, interviews with other appraisers, your own files. Gathering rental data should be an ongoing process for any appraiser. We can accumulate this type of information from these various sources at any time. We can watch newspaper ads and online sources and observe asking prices for rentals. Then when we start an assignment in which we need to estimate market rent, we don't have to start from scratch. End of page. Chapter start. 87%. Help. Documents. Email instructor. CH15 Income Capitalization Approach, Single Unit Properties. PG35 Market Rent. Notes. Leave a comment. Market rent. Rental data can be obtained from a longer time frame as it usually doesn't change that rapidly. Comparable sales hopefully occur within the last 6 months. Rental data and GRM analyses can be from further back in time, depending upon the activity in the local rental market. Realize, however, that market conditions may very well have changed since a lease was signed. We need to consider current rental transactions to ascertain if rental rates have changed significantly, either up or down. We may have to make an adjustment in the market rent in accordance with changes in market conditions. So, we study a number of rental transactions and then perhaps adjust the rents for differences in market conditions, physical differences, and lease conditions, if necessary. The rental comparables that we utilize may or may not have sold recently. When developing a GRM, we need comparables that were rented at the time of sale. However, rent comparables can be properties that have not sold, but are merely rented. End of page. Chapter start. 87%. approach, single unit properties. PG 36, adjusting rents. Notes. Leave a comment. Adjusting rents. If properties are significantly different in any aspect, so that the difference would result in a difference in the amount of rent it is able to attract, then we have to adjust that rent accordingly. Again, it's the same way we treat comparable sales in the sales comparison approach. If we can isolate one difference, we can quantify it through paired data analysis. Assume that property A has a garage and property B does not. Otherwise, they are substantially similar. Property A is rented for $1,000 per month and property B is rented for $975. The indicated rental value of the garage is $25 per month. Therefore, that is the adjustment we would make to a rental for a property that lacks a garage. In single unit appraising, adjustments are typically made on the basis of a dollar amount per month. An alternative method would be to make percentage adjustments. End of page. Chapter start. 87%. Help. Documents. Email instructor. CH15 income capitalization approach, single unit properties. EG37 adjusting rents. Notes. Leave a comment. Adjusting rents. There are many factors that could influence the earnings capacity of a single unit property. Any of those could require an adjustment when estimating market rent. Small or minor differences that would not be recognized by a typical renter need not require an adjustment. Just as in the sales comparison approach, adjustments should be made only for significant differences. Some property characteristics that might require an adjustment when estimating market rents would include, but not be limited to, location, access, transportation, schools, shopping, views, size of unit, condition, quality, amenities, functional utility, bedrooms, mechanical systems, appliances, individual thermostats, closet space, car storage, layout, windows, soundproofing, furnishings, operating expenses, lease provisions. End of page. Chapter start. 87%. Help. Documents. Email instructor. CH15 income capitalization approach, single unit properties. PG38, Fannie Mae Form 1007. Notes. Leave a comment. Fannie Mae Form 1007. Fannie Mae has created a form for reporting an opinion of market rent as part of an appraisal assignment. This form, numbered as Form 1007, is titled Single Family Comparable Rent Schedule. Click here to view. You should print it and then refer to it when we are discussing its features on the next pages. End of page. Chapter start. 87%.
Yeah, hold on. It won't let me read it out loud. What it says is a single family comparable rent schedule. This form is intended to provide the appraiser with a familiar format to estimate the market rent of the subject property. Adjustments should be made only for items of significant difference between the comparables and the subject property. It doesn't look too different from the URAR sales comparison section. It goes item subject, comp 1, comp 2, comp 3. Going down the grid, you got address, you got proximity to subject, you got the date of leases, begins and expires, you got the monthly rental, you got the something about less utilities, furniture, adjusted monthly rent, data source, rent adjustments, descriptions, rent concessions, location/view, design and appeal, age, condition, above grade, room count, gross living area, other things like basement, etc. Another box. And then on the second to last, it says net adjustment, total grid, and then indicated monthly rent column. Comments on market data, including the range of rents for single-family properties and estimate of vacancy of single-family properties, generally tied to vacancy, something above rent and concessions.
Help. Documents. Email instructor. CH15 income capitalization approach, single unit properties. PG39, Fannie Mae Form 1007. Notes. Leave a comment. Fannie Mae Form 1007. In their selling guide, Fannie Mae states that the use of Form 1007 is required. If the property is a one-unit investment property and the borrower is using rental income to qualify. Take a look at the top of the form itself. It describes the expectations and states. This form is intended to provide the appraiser with a familiar format to estimate the market rent of the subject property. Adjustments should be made only for items of significant difference between the comparables and the subject property. End of page. Chapter start. 87%. Help. Documents. Email instructor. CH15 income capitalization approach, single unit properties. PG40 Fannie Mae Form 1007. Notes. Leave a comment. Fannie Mae Form 1007. Let's look at the top part of the form. First, we enter the address and proximity to the subject. Then we fill in information about lease dates, if there is a lease. If not, we just enter the rental amount, if it is currently leased. Next, we are expected to subtract an amount for any utilities or furnishings that are included in the rent, to get down to a clean monthly rent figure that represents rent for the use of the space itself. This they call adjusted monthly rent. For example, assume the monthly rent is $1,000. However, it is completely furnished. Your research shows that similar unfurnished apartments rent for $900 per month. Also, the lease includes heat and hot water. Your research shows that apartments that size typically spend $75 per month for heat and hot water. You would subtract a total of $175 per month to arrive at an adjusted monthly rent of $825. Then you should cite your data sources. The source for the rental provisions would be the lease. Then you need to reference your research sources for the adjustment amounts. End of page. Chapter start. 88%. Help. Documents. Email instructor. CH15 income capitalization approach, single unit properties. PG41 Fannie Mae Form 1007. Notes. Leave a comment. Fannie Mae Form 1007. The next part of the form provides a convenient grid in which you may make adjustments for other factors that may impact the rent amounts. The first item is rent concessions. Rent concessions are similar to sales concessions. They provide inducements to entice prospective tenants to rent a property. They are frequently employed in slow markets when there are lots of competing units for rent. We also find them sometimes in new rental projects where concessions are employed to get a new project up and running. Rent concessions typically take the form of a reduced rent or free rent for the first month or two if a lease is signed. Other rent concessions could be in the form of providing some extra services or covering part of the utility costs. The second item is for location/view. You may have two virtually identical units in a project. However, one unit is on the top floor with a spectacular view and the other unit is on the first floor facing the parking lot. Or, you might have two very similar houses, but one fronts on a busy street and the other is at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. These items might require an adjustment which is reflected in a higher or lower rental figure. Remember here that we would not be making dollar adjustments that would reflect the difference in sale price, such as $3,000, but would make an adjustment that would reflect the difference in rent per month, such as $30. The next fields allow for space to adjust for differences in age/condition as well as for room count and GLA. In a similar fashion, adjustments might be made for significant differences between the subject and the rental comparables by adding or subtracting a market-derived figure to the existing rent of the comparable. Then there are two blank lines we may utilize for adjusting for any other factor. The form suggests one possibility, basement. Every property is different, so the possibilities for adjustment are substantial. We have to analyze each situation and make a decision as to whether or not there are mitigating factors that need to be taken into account.